Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're brand new. My name is Danielle and today I want to go over all of the books I read in May of 2025. I read 10 books in May, so we'll be here for a minute. I feel like this is the most books I've read in a single month the entire year. I had some really good reads in May, so I'm super excited. I am filming this at the very end of June, so this is actually going to go up, I want to say, on June 30th, so it's cutting it close there. I feel like I could almost film like all the books I read in June at this point. As always, I have my laptop down here because I need to refresh my brain on the books that I read and refresh on what some of them were about, because I don't know about you, but I'm the kind of person that I kind of forget what I read about after I read it, unless the book is just like that good. And I do have some of those books that I have read that are just that good, but I like to have my laptop just in case. I have my Goodreads open, so if you want to follow me on Goodreads, I think I have it linked in the description. I don't like write reviews on there, but what I do is I rate my books on there. That's how I keep track of them, so if you want to follow me, it'll be down below. But let's go ahead and jump right in since there's so many books for May. The first few books that I read in May were actually finishing up the Blue Moon series. If you watched the last books I read, it was all the books I read in April. I actually started the Blue Moon series by Lucy Score, and there's a ton of books in this series, and I actually stopped at number 5. The rest of the books in the series just didn't look interesting to me, so I stopped at number 5. So the first one I left off with was Not Part of the Plan. This is the 4th book, and this one actually follows our very first main character, female main character from the very first book. Her best friend is the male main character of this book, and it follows the sister of the female main character from the second book, if I'm remembering correctly, and they kind of find themselves in a friends to lovers situation. Again, another small town romance. This one I really liked. Again, I gave it 4 stars because I just really enjoyed, I think the first book is what I gave 5 stars. I really enjoyed that book, and if it didn't like get me more than that one, I rated it 4 stars. For this one, the male main character named Nico is supposed to be just like that bad boy character, and our female main character Emma does not go for that. She's looking for the one. She wants to spend her life with them, and she's like has it all planned out in her head. And then Nico struts into town and is trying to basically change all that. So she puts him in the friend zone, and then it's basically becomes a friends to lovers situation. So I really liked this one. I really enjoy friends to lovers. I think it was just a good amount of little romance, some spice, and it was just a good mix. And I think all of the books in the Blue Moon series are a good mix of like just plot, spice, and just like romance, and just they're all like little perfect books wrapped up into bundles. So I, again, would recommend all of these books. And then the last book that I left off with in this series is Holding On to Chaos, and this is the 5th book. Now this follows the very last sister of our female main character in book 2. So we kind of branched off. So we started with the brothers, the Pierce brothers, and then we branched off into best friends and siblings of the other characters in the other books, which is what makes this a very small town romance vibe, which I really enjoy. Small town romances, I feel like every time I read one, I just want to like move to a small town and just live out my small town fantasies. So this one has to do with the last sister and then the sheriff of the town. Now, I almost gave this one 3 stars, but I decided to give it 4 stars because this one had a lot more humor and comedy than the other ones, which sometimes I'm into that, but a lot of time I don't really love that, like a rom-com type of vibe. And I don't really love a lot of like humor in my romance books. I don't know, it's just me. So our female main character is a secret author. So she's hiding this part of herself from everyone, her family, everyone. She ends up meeting the sheriff of the town, and they kind of start having little feelings for each other, but they try to deny it. They're just friends. And they kind of work through the town, and we end up having like this big fallout with crime, which is kind of the humor part. If you read it, you would understand. And through the whole thing, they're like pushed together over and over again, and they are trying to not like go for their attraction for each other, but in the end, of course, the attraction always wins out. So I did like this one. But again, I almost rated it 3 stars because it was just it was really quirky. So, I do think it's good. And I think if you want to read the rest of the books in the series, if you like absolutely loved it, you could as well. I think one of the things that made me not want to read them is that one of them was like going back in the past, which I don't love that style of book. I don't know. It's just not my thing. And then another thing was it kind of moved from the main characters of like the Pierce brothers and their like spouses, siblings, and best friends and all of that onto like new people in the town. And I just didn't feel as connected to those people as I felt to all the other people that I had read about. So that's why I decided to just not read the rest. The next book I read in May, I read a physical copy, which I think I read a lot of Kindle books this month. So actually that's a lie. I had some physical books at the end, but this is One Golden Summer by Carly Fortune. I love her books. This was a new release and I had to read it right away. So this is about Alice, who ends up spending a summer with her grandmother at the lake when she was like 17 years old, and she was an aspiring photographer back then. She took this picture of these people on a boat, and she ends up having to go back to this lake house with her grandma because she broke her hip, and she volunteered to take care of her, and she wasn't really feeling fulfilled with her photography career. So she ends up going to the lake house, and then our male main character, Charlie, ends up being the guy who was in that boat that she took the picture of. So while they're all at this lake house together, they're getting pushed together over and over again. They feel an attraction for each other, and you already know in the end they give into their attraction, and they have to figure out if they can still see each other when they're not at the lake house. I gave this book 5 stars. I think I've rated all of her books 5 stars except for one. I have a soft spot in my heart for her, and I will literally buy every single one of her books. I love them to pieces. This, I think, is one of my favorites. I really, really enjoyed it. Someone told me that these were like interconnected standalones, and I don't remember enough details for her other books for me to connect those pieces. So maybe that's true, maybe that's not, but this was a great read. Highly, highly recommend. The next book I read is Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. This is a dark romance, so it's definitely not for everyone. I personally love dark romance. So that's just me. I love pretty much anything romance. There's very few things in romance that I will not read. There are a few, but there's very few. So this book is about a woman who is basically running from crimes that she may or may not have committed, and she is stealing people's identity on the way. She ends up finding herself meeting our main male character, and they end up hooking up the first time they ever see each other, and they think it's just gonna be a one-time thing, go their separate ways, move along, until she stays over at his house and steals his identity, which is her game all along. So then she basically steals his identity, she moves along. He, not so forgiving of her stealing his identity, is looking for her. He finds her, lures her onto his boat. There's a famous scene on the boat. If you are on Book Talk at all, you would know what I'm talking about. But he lures her on the boat. They end up stuck in a big storm. They shipwreck on this island with a lighthouse. They find this random guy living in this lighthouse. Things get very weird. This book definitely, I didn't really read the synopsis before I read it. I did a little bit, but like I wasn't really expecting all the things that had happened in the book. This book just like caught my attention and didn't let it go. So I did rate it 5 stars. It's kind of enemies to lovers, forced proximity. There's a lot of smut in this book. There is a thriller aspect as well. So it's kind of a bunch of different things wrapped up into one. So if those are kind of the things you like, I would highly recommend. If those are not the things you like, I would not recommend. But this was a really, really good book. The next book that I read in May, I finally picked up ACOTAR. So this is A Court of Thorns and Roses. I had been wanting to read this for a while. My sister kept trying to tell me to read it, and she would ask me, did you start it yet? And I finally was just like, okay, I'm gonna pick it up. I am someone who can read a fantasy series and then I need a little break from fantasy. I'm not like, just like, I can't go into fantasy after fantasy after fantasy. I have to take a break. So the books that I had read prior to this, I had had a break from, and so I picked up fantasy again. And I feel like I don't need to put a synopsis of this book, but I will. I did rate it 4 stars because it was way too slow for me. I do not love slow books. They are not my thing. It was a little bit faster towards the end, but like overall I was just like bored through it. And I also felt like it was a little bit confusing. Now I am not a huge fantasy reader. Like these are like my fantasy books, and I haven't even read From Blood and Ash yet. So like if I look back at the fantasy books that I have read, this is definitely like the most complicated to follow amongst all of them. But I did enjoy it, and I definitely did enjoy the next books more, which we'll go over, I think, 2 more in this video. But this book is our main character, Feyre, I think is how you say her name. I don't know. Don't even come at me for the name pronunciations. I have no idea. But she ends up killing a wolf in the woods, and it ends up being a fairy. So she ends up being hunted down by Tamlin, who is a fairy. And at first he is like rude and mean, but then they start falling for each other, which, I'm not gonna lie, this whole book series definitely gave me like Vampire Diaries feels in the aspect of like Stefan and Damon, which if you've read it, I feel like you would relate to that. And so I did kind of like Tamlin, but he wasn't my favorite. But then obviously we meet Reese. I think that's how you say his name. I honestly have no idea. And then that's kind of like the other person. I don't want to give like spoilers for this book series, so I'm going to kind of leave it at that because I don't know. I don't know what's spoiler and what's not, and it stresses me because I don't want to spoil anything. So obviously most people have read this book, so like you probably already know what's happening in it, but I'm gonna leave it at that. Okay, the next book that I read, I had to take a break from ACOTAR to read this book because it just came out. This is Rewind It Back. This is part of the Windy City series. Now, if you ask me, my number 1 series of books that I've ever read in my entire life is the Windy City series. Every single book has gripped me tight and not let me go. I literally love these books so much. They need a spot on my bookshelf. I just haven't purchased them. They're always on Kindle Unlimited, but I like need physical copies of them. All-time favorite series ever, hands down, recommended to every single person ever. This 5th and final book in the series follows Rio, who is one of the people on the hockey team that we followed before, and this one is a second chance romance. So these 2 characters were in love with each other when they were younger, basically high school age, and things happened, things went awry, they broke each other's hearts, all that stuff. And so she finds herself accepting a job in Chicago, which is where he plays hockey. And she basically works for an interior design firm, and she gets signed up to do a design project on his house, but she's also living next door to the same house. So they end up finding themselves having to work together to do this house over and over and over again. So there's very much a forced proximity trope in this book, as well as second chance and friends to lovers. So it's honestly a lot of good things wrapped up into one. They basically go along and they're trying to be friends and like forget about what happened, and they think that they can't work together, and then they start like having their feelings again. And it just is honestly one of the best second chance romance books I've ever read in my entire life. So literally, if you haven't read the Windy City series, if you take anything from anything I've ever said about books, this is the series that you have to read. It is the best series ever. The next book I read was called Forced Proximity. Now, I rated this book 3 stars, so that just kind of gives you what's about to happen. Y'all know I don't rate 3 stars super often. I didn't know how I felt about this book. This book is a dark romance, so not for everyone. It's also a forced proximity, enemies to lovers, college, all of that, and it's also a duet, but this one ends on a cliffhanger and the second one's not out yet. I did know this when I read it, but I had seen like something on TikTok and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I decided to read it. Not my favorite. I am going to read the second one, but just overall 3 stars was what it needed. So this is about our female main character who has to move to a new college because she gets shot at her old college. And she moves to this like big fancy like gated college, and she finds herself thrown into the arms of who ends up being a teacher, which I don't think is a spoiler. Oh, I think it's fine. And she then finds herself kicked out of her dorm room to live in this house with said teacher plus a few other guys that go to the college. And she basically has different experiences with each guy in the house. So this is definitely like one woman, multiple men situation. But it kind of, I don't really know. There is some plot to this book. There is plot. I don't know if it's great plot. I just feel like it was very not memorable. Like, I feel like I forgot almost everything I read in this book, to be honest, because it just wasn't memorable. It wasn't amazing. So 3 stars is what I rated it. So I guess if that sounds like something you're interested in, then go for it. I don't know. I can't say if I really recommend it or not. It's definitely not for everyone. But I do feel like there's some people out there who would absolutely love that book. It just wasn't my favorite. And then we've made it to the end. The very last book that I want to go over is actually the second book in the ACOTAR series, which is A Court of Mist and Fury. I think I said earlier that I had 2 more books to go over, but it's actually just this one. This might be my favorite in the series. I don't know. This or the next one is my favorite. But I don't want to go like into a synopsis or anything because I feel like I'm going to spoil something on accident. But this is the second book in the ACOTAR series. I rated this 5 stars. This was freaking amazing. Like, I live and die for this book. This was amazing. Now, again, it was very, very slow at the beginning. I think that's like a theme with all these. But once you get to just the good part, you just can't put it down. And I love books that I just cannot put down. So again, would recommend this series. It is a little bit hard to follow at some points. I definitely was struggling, especially like saying people's names and like all of that. But I would recommend the ACOTAR. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Let me know if you've read any of these books that I read in May, and let me know your thoughts on them. Also, let me know some of the books that you read in May, and let me know if I should read those. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again in my next video.